Well, I felt I might as well have had a symphony orchestra. The sounds in your poems, Yvonne, are just extraordinary. Amphibian, a cold, the old amphibian blood, and just gorgeous. And what chilling irony in the Audubon poem, and I don't think I have this exactly right, Yvonne, so forgive me, but the children will learn from what is missing from the trees. Just chilling. This is the real thing. In the early 1990s, a writer was grief-struck by the death of her dear friend and mentor. Her friend, a woman, was gone too soon in her early 40s. The writer poured that grief into a book of elegies, which I've just discovered became a kind of handbook for the AIDS epidemic. It became something that was read deeply by those suffering from that epidemic. But somehow, in her grief, this writer also addressed the very nature of poetics. How surprised I was to find these lines. In the night orchards, the dreamer walked over coals with the poems and made creation seem effortless. There. What do you fear in a poem? I fear the moment of excess, as in March, when oxalis comes out all in one day. What do you fear in the poem? I fear the moment of withholding, especially inside what I thought was free. And I feared the poem was just like her. Whew. That writer, that poet, is the American poet Brenda Hillman. And she lives in between that place of excess and withholding. She holds that tension magnificently in her poetry. That was just her third book of poems that I was reciting from, Death Tractates. 5 more followed, including the much recognized and celebrated 2013 collection, Seasonal Works with Letters on Fire, which was the 4th volume in a series, Earth, Air, I'm missing one, but water, thank you, and fire, thank you. Okay. And I have to say I was really thrilled because I was at the Griffin Award ceremony in Toronto last June, and this is absolutely true, that when Brenda read in the night before the award was announced, I really had picked her for the international winner. I didn't do so well with the Canadian winner, and I won't go into that, but I was thrilled that she won. Her reading that night in this beautiful music hall in Toronto was really exceptional. And for those of you who don't know, the Griffin Poetry Prize, which is endowed by the Canadian industrialist Scott Griffin, has really become one of the most prestigious poetry prizes to win in the world. So that was a remarkable honor. In her work, Hillman's humanity shines through. This line from Seasonal Works floors me. Sometimes I am sick of humans, except for babies, poets, and the ones I love. So I hope she loves us, because, you know, how many poets are here? Yes, okay. So tonight, from California, thank you so much for coming all this way to be with us, the American poet, Brenda Hillman.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Yvonne. Gorgeous reading, and Sam. Yeah. So I am going to read 5 poems, very different poems, I think. But I want to dedicate the reading to the poets of Cascadia, and especially to the students who live and work here, and my granddaughter who's in the audience, Josephine. So thank you for your work and efforts. And thanks to the organizers, David and all the committee, and to Paul Nelson, who has been so tireless in his efforts. So I'm going to start with a poem that, get my 10 minutes right here, with a poem that comes out of my hypnotherapy practice, which is in the Water Book. And I have done hypnotherapy for about 20 years, or a little over actually. And so, in one of the characters in my hypnotherapy is a character that I encounter called my anarchist. And she advises me to do things. In the trance, a pretty anarchist said to me, "It's not that a great love happens. What happened became your great love." Her echo had an ancient glow, and so proved buoyant for my little craft. I left the world and felt a world. The bee loading its gloves with powder, the albatross wanting one thing from the sea. "Nothing can wreck our boat," said she. And when the water felt the glacier, the future held a present tense. The present held a future without cease. So I traveled to Washington, D.C. for about 5 or 6 years to protest the many wars that the U.S. has been imperialist instigator of. And I was sick of it, and I traveled to Congress, and I did a lot of lobbying and protesting, and one of the things that I did was sort of make up actions with the group that I was working with, but also on my own. And in one of the committee hearings, I sat in a lot of committee hearings, and in one of the committee hearings they were defending the telecom companies for the electronic surveillance, and I was pouring water on the floor of Congress. In a House subcommittee on electronic surveillance. It would be lovely to ask water to investigate domestic spying, so I put myself in a trance right here in Congress, holding a bottle of H2O from California, so when the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General reads probable cause to believe, the water shakes its curly geyser brain, and when he says need to close the gaps, it shakes ×3 till its letters break and splash on the floor of the Rayburn building. Oh, 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 during the report about reading your email. Maybe it's not your email. From the second row, it's possible to see white ridges in his thumbnails while he holds, surveillance has to be reasonable as the prong molecules of water trickle through the carpet to find the vault where the Electronic Surveillance Modernization Act, the Terrorist Surveillance Act, the National Security Surveillance Act, and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Improvement and Enhancement Act are stashed to hide them from the mobs of 1772. There's a secret in every act down there. I hear some water interview the ants who make the basic laws of the land, and while the deputy reads, "Ferret out terrorists," the water interviews a ferret under the Capitol Mall that can't quite streamline operations in the ruddy soil. Perspective is gained. The trance method seems to be working well. I can see half a heart in each congressman. I can see the deputy has a shaving cut and a sunbeam shining through the skin of his left ear. It's feeling rather prone, the light. It's pink, the color of winter robin's legs, that makes me want not to hate him. It's the tendency of light to change itself. He probably has 2 kids and lives in Fairfax, near where Whitman's mockingbird spends winters. He was sprinkled with birth. His death floats near the secrets he can't read. There's a clue in every word down there. When he says has to be reasonable, the droplets splash their skinny necks and swelling Buddha bellies and break to make Capitol Hill spell I toll or top all ill. You at home, what do you feel? You can vote by calling 1-900, it's either too fucking late or too early. There's a secret in every century that likes it if you shout. There is time for our little secret. There is space for the secret spilling out. Oops. One of the things we can do is carry our own containers. So I wrote a book called Cascadia, but it turns out that Point Reyes is like 1.5 inches below Cascadia. So, but David McCloskey told me that in 22 million years, so I'm going to be a Cascadian poet someday. I think you really am. I'm hanging in there. Anyway, I'm going to read one.
Take care of yourself.
I was really doing a mythological geology as consciousness. That's the metaphor of this book. So it's a little metaphoric all throughout. This is a very short environmental poem, and it's based on Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn, Styrofoam Cup. Thou still unravished, thou bride, thou unstill, thou unravished, unbride, unthou, unbride. So two from seasonal works, one very different poems. One is dedicated to my father, who had heart surgery a few years ago, and he, being a farm boy, he had a valve put in, and he chose to have a pig valve rather than a plastic valve. Till it finishes what it does. Where is the meaning, the old man asked. The night nurse had put on his little frowning socks. He lay on his life bed in the dusk, holding the tail of a comet. Outside the hospital, creosote, the cactus wren is such a good packer. Granite, wild at the hands of quartz, rose in the saddle of the mountains. I'm writing this with a pharmaceutical pen at the nexus of science and magic. When all the visitors had left the room, the tiny valve of the pig beat inside our father's heart like the spokes of the sun disk in a hieroglyph above the squiggly river symbol, like meaning and its tributaries, nothingness and art. Active one, the animal is not your emissary. It is not the decoration you sought. Its beauty runs without your will. It drives the mystical heart. And I'll close with, the U.S. is experiencing a lot of police brutality, as usual, but more than usual. And this is a poem that was written during Occupy Cal, when there was a lot of police brutality, and I've been thinking a lot about racial violence and class violence and the struggle to demilitarize. So my husband and I were participating in a protest to defend students. So thank you very much for your attention and this great conference, and for all your poems. A brutal encounter recollected in tranquility, which of course is a play on Wordsworth. Emotion recollected in tranquility. There's a space of uncertainty in every act, even standing before police in riot gear. Looking into their eyes, we think it's possible to reach them. We reach out with my feelers. The crowd presses in. The night is exactly the age of our students. What will be called batons, nightsticks, or truncheons, clubs, are certain in the angle of the hitting. Looking into the eyes of the officers when they start moving to clear a bit of ground, we know the point is lost. The evening news reports resistance to officers, but not to bad money. Looking into their eyes, trained not to meet other eyes, amber spokes around each pupil, we think they are scared, but not scared enough, and some probably have children in public schools. What should we do with the lost point? Euclid notes that geometry begins from a point that has no part. Peaceful protest as they move forward. A student resists and is beaten. Our feet no longer touch earth, but connect with other feet underground. Will defending the tents bring down bad money? I distrust moral certainty, and even distrust the sentence, I distrust moral certainty. I admire the anti-heroic line of ants. I admire the unknown. Looking the cops in the eye is not the point, nor is fighting about the state budget the point, nor is the point waking up in jail to pay for a decade that was asleep. The point moves with other points in beauty and justice because we cannot see the whole. A group can be mystical or a mob. The point moves during the hitting that moves where the body stands or lies. 2 feet make 2 points, and that is how the line is drawn. Sometimes I'm sick of humans, except for babies, poets, and the ones I love. As we stand outside loving each other, we cannot forget the ants under us, making us smart corridors in the wet ground, even lines under the chancellor's house, seeking sweets at all hours, finding friends who are exceptions, whose actions make a line. If ants fail, they begin again. When the officers use their nightsticks, truncheons, batons on your ribs, we are knocked back, but students have it worse. They're dead. They take blows in a line on the earth. You cannot be sure you won't fight back until your friends are in danger. The cops have put hitting behind that feeling. Had I been able to stop the officer's nightstick by grabbing it, I would have, but I'm not stupid. A smallish grandmother versus them, and I did not believe grabbing their sticks would work out. Don't hit, I was telling the baby earlier. There are many theories about violence, but when people rise up, it is mostly unplanned. Use your heads, we shout naively at the cops. We won't be a better person until schools are free, but the nightstick cannot poke our soul. Oh no, that nightstick cannot poke the soul. More students are beaten, we cannot stop it. We are close enough to see our feelers in their badges and the numbers, a bit of bronze and silver in our compound eyes. We have taken an experiment outdoors. Our writing accommodates uncertainty, but most people prefer certainty, which is why writers become depressed. Later, the place where police put their truncheons hurts when we make love, and we will make love outside of time. Go home to your families, we naively shout, and try to study the badges in our section. Later, we recall one of the cops was named Young and another was named Hart. Euclid says non-existent points can make a line we all agree exists. Your writing offers recovery from non-existence, and one cure for depression is action. Writing may be your most necessary action, but it can't be your only one. If you find yourself on the dirt with feelers, it is good to get back underground. The ants reach other ants at the edge of the lawn. They pass the message along.